All right, get ready to dive in because we're tackling Japanese verb conjugation today.
It's a big one.
It is, and I'll be honest, it's a topic that can seem really intimidating at first glance.
Oh, absolutely.
But hopefully, by the end of this deep dive, we can convince everyone that it's not as scary as it sounds.
Yeah, it's actually quite elegant and logical.
Exactly, like a beautifully crafted puzzle. So we're going to break it down piece by piece and uncover the inner workings of this really complex system.
Sounds good.
And by the end, you'll be amazed at how much more manageable and even, dare I say, fun it can be.
Definitely. I'm excited to help guide you through it.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics. When we talk about conjugation, what are we actually talking about? What's going on with these Japanese verbs?
So what's really cool about Japanese verb conjugation is that it's really systematic.
Okay.
Unlike English, where verbs can morph into completely different words depending on the tense,
Right.
like go and went. Japanese verbs follow these really predictable patterns.
Okay.
The magic is that the verb stem, the core meaning of the verb,
Yeah.
actually stays the same.
So that's reassuring, right?
It is. It's just about what we tack on at the end.
Oh.
Kind of like adding different accessories to like a base outfit to dress it up in different ways.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that analogy. So where do we even begin? Like what are some of those accessories, I guess?
So let's start with the three main groups of verbs that you'll encounter. Godan, uchidan, and then, of course, our irregular verbs.
Okay. Godan and Ichidan, they sound like characters from a martial arts movie.
They do.
I feel like I should bow to them or something.
Right. But their origins are actually in the Japanese writing system.
Oh, interesting.
So if you remember those beautiful characters, hiragana and katakana, they're derived from a table called the Gojion, which means 50 sounds.
Great.
Now imagine this table as like a grid with 5 rows that represent different vowel sounds. Godan verbs, true to their name, can span all 5 of these vowel rows during conjugation.
Hold on. So you're telling me this table, this Gojin table, isn't just for learning characters. It also holds like the secrets to verb conjugation.
It does. And get this, the conjugation patterns for Godan verbs actually follow a visual pattern on the Gojion table.
What?
Yeah. Each conjugation kind of shifts the verb's ending across those vowel rows in a specific order. It's like this hidden code embedded within the writing system itself.
That is so cool. I'm already starting to see what people mean by the elegance of Japanese verb conjugation.
Right.
Okay, so Godan verbs, 5 rows, lots of movement, very dynamic.
Yes.
What about those Ichidan verbs? Are they content just sticking to one row?
You could say that.
Okay.
They are kind of the minimalist designers of the verb world.
Okay.
Ichidan verbs, they always end in aru in their dictionary form, and they just have a much simpler approach.
Yeah.
To conjugate them, you literally just drop the ru and you attach the appropriate ending.
Okay, so no complicated vowel shifting for those verbs.
No.
Not at all. That's good. I could get behind that. Okay, so Godan verbs. They're out there. They're doing their vowel dancing on the Gojion table. Ichidan verbs. They're keeping it simple, straightforward.
Exactly.
We love that. I'm assuming, though, there are still quite a few forms and endings to keep track of, right?
There are. You're not wrong.
Okay.
But to make things a little bit more manageable, we have this concept called verb bases.
Verb bases. Is that like the foundation that we're going to build all these conjugations on?
That's a really great way to put it.
Okay.
Think of verb bases like blueprints.
Okay.
Each base provides this starting point for creating different tenses, different moods.
Okay.
So you have your base blueprint for present and future actions, and then another one for past actions, and so on and so forth.
So we've got our verb stems, we've got our blueprints, and now we just need to explore all the different outfits.
Yes, exactly.
All the different, the endings, the conjugations that create all the different forms.
Yeah, and here's a fascinating thing about the Japanese language and languages in general.
Okay.
Like over time, Japanese, like any language, has gone through some changes.
Of course, yeah.
Leading to what we call sub-bases.
Sub-bases? What are those?
Think of them like the vintage blueprints that have been passed down.
Okay.
They stem from older forms of the language, and they add this kind of extra layer of nuance to verb conjugation.
Oh, so it's like those beautiful, intricate details you find in centuries-old architecture. It's like a testament to the history that's embedded within the structure itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news is, even with those vintage blueprints, the system remains really, really consistent.
Okay.
So once you understand the patterns, you'll see how manageable it becomes.
Music to my ears.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we dive into the specific forms and their functions, what about those irregular verbs? We can't let them get away without talking about them a little bit.
Right, of course. Suru and kuru,
Yep.
these verbs kind of march to the beat of their own drum.
Of course they do.
They have their own unique conjugation patterns that don't neatly fit into those Godin or Cheatin categories.
They're the rebels.
Exactly.
Gotta love them. All right. Anything else we should know about before we unleash the power of Japanese verb conjugation?
Well, we can't forget the copula.
The copula, yes.
It might not be a verb in the strictest sense, but it acts like one.
Right.
It's very, very important.
Right, that infamous to be verb. It's always essential.
It is. And in Japanese, you'll often see it as da or desu.
Right.
And just like those irregular verbs, they have their own little conjugation patterns.
Okay.
But, here's a fun fact. The words dar and deishu, which you hear all the time, they actually have their roots in the copula.
Really?
Over time, they've just kind of evolved.
Wow. So even the seemingly simple words have these like hidden depths and fascinating backstories. This is what I love about languages, always full of surprises.
Absolutely.
Well, speaking of surprises, are you ready to see some of these conjugations in action?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's actually get our hands dirty, get in there.
Time to conjugate.
It's conjugate. But first, can we just do a little review? What are the essential Japanese tenses? What do we need to know?
Totally. So let's start with present and future.
Okay.
In Japanese, those are often covered by just one form called the imperfective.
The imperfective. It sounds kind of, I don't know, incomplete almost.
It does. It's like a work in progress, yeah.
Okay.
So the imperfective form, it describes actions that are ongoing, habits, or even just things that will happen in the future. So it's like saying, I eat, I will eat, or even I generally eat.
That's pretty efficient, right? One form, multiple possibilities. But you mentioned earlier that it can't be used for those continuous actions like I am eating right now. How do you handle those?
Yeah, good catch. For those actions that are happening right this second, we need a different form. It's the T form, which we'll get to a little bit later.
Okay, all right. The magical T form. Got it.
Yeah, it's one of those that it can do a whole bunch of things. It's very versatile.
Okay. I've made a note. We'll come back to that. Now, what about when we want to express the opposite, like I don't eat? Is that where the negative form comes in?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Negative form is your go-to for all things negation.
Okay.
Whether it's in the present, the future, even as like a general statement.
Uh-huh.
And just like with the imperfective, it actually follows a pretty predictable pattern.
Okay.
Depending on which verb group you're working with.
Oh, I do love those predictable patterns. Can you walk me through how that works? How do you form the negative?
Sure. Let's use the verb tabaru, meaning to eat.
Okay.
That's a Godin verb.
Okay.
So we need to consult our trusty Gojuin table. Remember we talked about those 5 vowel rows?
Yeah.
Okay, so for negation, we shift that final U sound in tabaru to the A row. So that gives us tab.
Okay.
And then we tack on nai.
Tabane.
Exactly.
Oh.
Tabanai, meaning don't eat.
Don't eat. Okay, got it.
Now Ichiden verbs are even easier.
Okay, even easier. Okay. I'm listening.
You just drop the ru and add nai. So miru, to see, becomes
Minai.
minai. Don't see.
Minai.
Okay.
Easy peasy.
Okay, see, that wasn't so bad.
Right.
I'm starting to feel like I could do this. What about the past tense? How do we talk about things that have already happened?
So the past tense is where the perfective form comes in.
Perfective.
This one's a bit more intricate
Okay.
because it often involves those sound changes that we talked about earlier,
Right.
especially for our Godin verbs.
Okay, so like euphonic changes, where it's like the Japanese language has an ear for music and it wants things to flow.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example of how that works?
Sure. So let's take the verb kaku, to write.
Okay, kaku.
So you might expect the past tense to just be kakuta,
Right.
but because of these euphonic changes, it actually becomes kaita.
Kaita. Wow. Okay.
It's pretty amazing how much attention to detail goes into this. I'm starting to understand why people say that Japanese is a very nuanced language.
It really is. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to a form that I've heard is super important and also surprisingly versatile. The T form.
The T form.
Yeah, the T form. I've heard it's it can do everything. It's like the Swiss Army knife of Japanese verb conjugation.
I love that. It's a great analogy. It really is. So you'll find this one everywhere.
Everywhere.
And it does a lot of things. For one, it can be used to connect clauses, right? So like the word and does in English.
Okay.
But it can also soften requests. make them more casual, more friendly.
Oh, interesting.
So, for example, instead of just directly saying, drink your tea,
right.
you can say, ocha o nonde, which is much closer to like, have some tea.
Right.
It's not a direct translation, but it's much more casual.
That's very useful. It's like a built-in politeness feature.
It is.
I like it.
And here's where it gets really interesting. You can also use the te form with auxiliary verbs.
Auxiliary verbs, those are like verb enhancers, right? Like adding like another layer of meaning.
Exactly. So, for example, if you wanted to say, I am eating, you would use the te form of taberu.
Tabete.
Kabete, good.
Okay.
And combine it with the auxiliary verb iru.
Tabeteru.
Tabete iru.
I am eating. Okay, so it's like building blocks of meaning. Okay, I'm seeing why the te form is so important.
Yeah.
Now, what about that other connecting form, the conjunctive form? How is that different from the te form?
Great question. So they're both connectors, right? But they have their own kind of specific roles.
Okay.
Think of it this way. The te form is like holding hands.
Okay.
It's connecting verbs that are very close in meaning.
Right.
Or they're either both controllable actions or both uncontrollable events.
Okay.
Right? So, for example, like...
I don't know why I'm just picturing like verbs holding hands, and now I can't get that out of my head.
I know.
It's very cute. Okay, so the te form is like they're buddies. They're holding hands.
They're buddies.
What about the conjunctive form?
The conjunctive form is more like a bridge.
Okay, a bridge. Okay.
It can connect things that might be a little further apart conceptually.
Okay.
So, for example, if one verb is controllable and the other one isn't.
Okay. So if I wanted to say, I read a book and drank coffee, I would use the te form because those are both things that, I'm choosing to do, I'm doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if I wanted to say, I woke up and it was raining,
right,
I would use the conjunctive form.
Okay.
Because waking up and raining aren't really directly related.
Right. And one's a choice and one is just,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fate.
It's all about the relationship.
It is all about the relationship. I love how much nuance there is. This is so cool. Okay, I'm ready for the next one. What about the volitional form? That one sounds very intriguing.
Okay. Yes.
Volitional. The volitional form. This one is all about expressing desires, making suggestions, even going into like the realm of guesses.
Ooh, this is getting personal.
It is.
Give me an example. Give me the volitional form in action.
Okay, so imagine you're with a friend. You want to suggest going for a walk.
Okay.
You could say sanpo shi, which translates to let's go for a walk.
Okay.
Or you could use it to make a guess, like ame ga furu kamoshiranai.
What does that mean?
It might rain.
It might rain.
Yeah, so it's about expressing what you want to do, what you want other people to do, or even what you think might happen.
So it's about possibilities.
Possibilities, okay.
This is great. I'm loving this. All right, so we've got the volitional. Let's see, what else is there? Oh, the passive form. Now, I've heard this one can be kind of tricky for English speakers to wrap their heads around.
It can be, especially if you're coming from a language like English where it's not as commonly used. But the passive form is all about shifting the focus from the doer of the action to the receiver of the action.
Okay, so instead of saying, I ate the cake, it would be like, the cake was eaten.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes the person or thing doing the eating isn't even mentioned.
Oh, interesting.
It'll just be like, the cake was eaten, and you're left to infer who the likely culprit was.
It's like a mystery.
It is.
I like it. Okay, so the passive voice, it's not just about like who did what, but also about like how the speaker feels about it, I'm guessing.
That's a great way to put it. It can express neutrality, regret, even respect. It just depends on the context.
Okay. Wow, it's so nuanced. This is so cool. But what about when someone makes someone illessy do something? Like that classic, my mom made me eat my vegetables scenario.
That's where the causative form comes in.
Causative.
Yeah. This one's all about expressing those forced or permitted actions.
So in that scenario, could I say, okusan yasai o tabesasareta?
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
That translates to, I was made to eat my vegetables by my mom.
By my mom.
Yeah. And just when you thought it couldn't get any more exciting, we have the causative passive form.
Wait, hold on. Causative passive, there's a combination.
Yes. So that's combining the causative and the passive that we've already talked about.
My brain's ready. Okay, what does that do?
So that expresses the idea of being made to do something that you probably didn't want to do.
Oh, no.
Like it's the ultimate form of obligation.
Like I was forced to eat my vegetables even though they tasted like dirt.
Yes. And what's even more interesting is that in casual conversation, the causative passive often gets shortened,
Okay.
So it creates this really compact, dynamic way of expressing those I was totally forced into this situations. It's a little dramatic.
It's linguistic drama.
Exactly.
Oh, I love it. This is incredible. Japanese verbs have so many layers. What other vipers await us in this world of conjugation? Okay, so we've covered expressing like desires and obligations and, even being forced to eat our vegetables.
Right.
Which, by the way, I'm still traumatized, but
Understand.
it's fine. It's fine. We're moving on. But what about those times when you need to be more direct? Like you're not asking, you're telling. Like you're giving someone a command.
That's where the imperative form comes in.
The imperative.
Yeah, this is the one for those just do it moments.
Okay, so I'm picturing like a drill sergeant yelling, "Eat your vegetables." Is that about right?
Pretty much. But a word of caution, the imperative form can sound very blunt in everyday conversation.
Okay.
Like imagine just going up to your friend and saying, eat.
Right.
That probably wouldn't go over very well.
Yeah, no, that's a little aggressive. So, like with everything else, it's about choosing the right tool for the job. So if you don't want to accidentally offend your friends, what are some other ways to make requests in Japanese?
Right. So Japanese has a whole arsenal of polite expressions and forms that you can use.
Okay, good.
That make it much softer.
Good.
For example, remember the po form we talked about?
Yes. Our friend.
You can use that with kudasai, which is a much, much more common and much more polite way.
Okay, good to know. Noted. No linguistic faux pas for us.
Exactly.
All right, so we've covered commands, but what about expressing ability, like what you can and can't do? That's where the potential form comes in, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I could finally express my lifelong dream, or maybe nightmare, of being able to eat an entire cake in one sitting.
There you go.
I knew it. All right. So how would I say I can speak Japanese using this potential form?
So you would say, Nihongo ga hanasamasu.
Nihongo ga hanasamasu.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I think I'm getting it. Now, for the real test, can this potential form help me get out of driving?
I don't know about that.
Worth a shot. But like seriously, how would I say I can't drive?
So you would say, Watashi wa unten dekimasen.
Watashi wa unten dekimasen.
Perfect.
Okay, so I can use it to express inability as well as ability.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, this is great. But here's a thought, right? In English, we often use can to ask for permission. So like, can I go to the bathroom? Right.
Can I use the potential form for that?
So that's actually a really important nuance because you can't...
Oh, no.
I know, right? In Japanese, the potential form doesn't really work that way.
Oh, okay.
So if you were to say that using the potential form, it would sound more like you're asking, am I capable of using your pen?
Right, which is a very strange question to ask.
It is a very strange question to ask.
Okay, duly noted. So I'll make sure to brush up on my polite permission-asking phrases. All right, we've explored so many fascinating forms, but there's one more on our list.
Yeah.
The conditional form.
Yeah.
This is all about those if this, then that situations, right?
Exactly. Hypotheticals, general truths, even expressing those like unspoken consequences.
Ooh, unspoken consequences. I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
All right, so the negative conditional form is especially interesting because in English you might say, I have to study.
Right.
Right. But in Japanese, the equivalent literally translates to something like, if I don't study, it won't do.
So it's like implying this negative consequence if you don't study.
So the grammar itself is already like hinting at the consequences of not doing your homework.
Exactly, yeah.
That's amazing. That's like a built-in motivator. I love it. This has been incredible. We've gone from like basic verb groups and blueprints to expressing like really subtle nuances and even uncovering these like hidden cultural insights all through the lens of Japanese verb conjugation. I feel like we've unlocked a secret code.
It is kind of like a secret code, isn't it? And that's the beauty of language, right?
Yes.
It's a gateway to understanding not just words, but different ways of thinking and experiencing the world.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway that you want our listener to walk away with about Japanese verb conjugation?
You know, I would say don't be afraid to just dive in and embrace the elegance of the system.
I love that.
It's really not about memorizing these endless lists of forms, but it's about understanding the logic behind it, the patterns. And once you do that, you'll find that Japanese verb conjugation is not this fearsome beast that everyone makes it out to be.
Right.
But it's actually this really fascinating and expressive tool for communication.
Beautifully said. So to our listener, keep exploring, keep practicing, and remember, every new form that you master brings you one step closer to fluency. Until next time, happy conjugating.